Welcome back to Armageddon 2419 AD, Chapter 12, The Finger of Doom. As we crossed the Hudson River a few miles north of the city, we dropped several units of the Yellow Intelligence Division with full instrumental equipment. Their apparatus cases were nicely balanced at only a few ounces weight each, and the men used their chute capes to ease their drops. We recrossed the river a little distance above and began dropping white intelligence units and a few long and short range gun units. Then we held our positions until we began to get reports. Gradually, we ringed the territory of the Sensings, our observation units working busily and patiently at their locators and scopes, both aloft and aground, until Garland finally turned to me with the remark. Circle is complete now, boss. We've got clear locations all the way around them. Let me see it, I replied, and studied the illuminated viewplate. With its little overlapping circles of light that indicated spots proved clear of the enemy by ultrascopic observation, I nodded to Bill Hearn. Go ahead now, Hearn, I said, and place your barrage men. He spoke into his ultraphone, and three of the ships began to glide in a wide ring around the enemy territory. Every few seconds, at the word from his unit boss, a gunner would drop off the wire and, slipping the clasp of his chute cape, drift down into the darkness below. Bill formed two lines parallel to and facing the river and enclosing the entire territory of the enemy between them. Above and below, straddling the river, were two defensive lines. These latter were merely to hold their positions. The others were too close in toward each other, pushing a high explosive barrage 5 miles ahead of them. When the two barrages met, both lines were to switch to short division range barrage and continue to close in on any of the enemy who might have drifted through the previous curtain of fire. In the meantime, Bill kept his reserves, a picked corps of 100 men, the same that had accompanied Hart and myself in our fight with the Han squadron, in the air, divided about equally among the kite tails of 4 ships. A final roll call by units, companies, divisions, and functions established the fact that all our forces were in position. No Han activity was reported, and no Han broadcast indicated any suspicion of our expedition. Nor was there any indication that the Sinsings had any knowledge of the fate in store for them. The idling of rep ray generators was reported from the center of their camp. Obviously, those of the ships the Hans had given them, the price of their treason to their race. Again, I gave the word, and Hearn passed on the order to his subordinates. Far below us, and several miles to the right and left, the two barrage lines made their appearance. From the great height to which we had risen, they appeared like lines of brilliant, winking lights, and the detonations were muffled by the distances into a sort of rumbling, distant thunder. Hearn and his assistants were very busy measuring, calculating, and snapping out ultraphone orders to unit commanders that resulted in the straightening of lines and the closing of gaps in the barrage. The White Division boss reported the utmost confusion in the Sensing organization. They were, as might be expected, an inefficient, loosely disciplined gang, and repeated broadcasts for help to neighboring gangs, ignoring the fact that the Mongolians had not used explosives for many generations. They nevertheless jumped at the conclusion that they were being raided by the Hans. Their frantic broadcast persisted in this thought, despite the nervous electrophonic inquiries of the Hans themselves, to whom the sound of the battle was evidently audible and who were trying to locate the trouble. At this point, the swooper I had sent south toward the city went into action as a diversion to keep the Hans at home. Its kite tail, loaded with long-range gunners using the most highly explosive rockets we had, hung invisible in the darkness of the sky and bombarded the city from a distance of about 5 miles, with an entire city to shoot at, and the object of creating as much commotion therein as possible, regardless of actual damage. The gunners had no difficulty in hitting the mark. I could see the glow of the city and the stabbing flashes of exploding rockets. In the end, the Hans, uncertain as to what was going on, fell back on a defensive policy and shot their hell cylinder or wall of upturned disintegrator rays into operation. That, of course, ended our bombardment of them. The rays were a perfect defense, disintegrating our rockets as they were reached. If they had not sent out ships before turning on the rays, and if they had none within sufficient radius already in the air, all would be well. I queried Garland on this, but he assured me Yellow Intelligence reported no indications of Han ships nearer than 800 miles. This would probably give us a free hand for a while, since most of their instruments recorded only imperfectly or not at all through the death wall. Requisitioning one of the viewplates of the headquarters ship and the services of an export operator, I instructed him to focus on our lines below. I wanted a close up of the men in action. He began to manipulate his controls, and chaotic shadows moved rapidly across the plate, fading in and out of focus until he reached an adjustment that gave me a picture of the forest floor, apparently 100 feet wide, with the intervening branches and foliage of the trees appearing like shadows that melted into reality a few feet above the ground. I watched one man setting up his long gun with skillful speed. His lips pursed slightly as though he were whistling as he adjusted the tall tripod on which the long tube was balanced. Swiftly he twirled the knobs controlling the aim and elevation of his piece. Then, lifting a belt of ammunition from the big box, which itself looked heavy enough to break down the spindly tripod, he inserted the end of it in the lock of his tube and touched the proper combination of buttons. Then he stepped aside and occupied himself with peering carefully through the trees ahead. Not even a tremor shook the tube, but I knew that at intervals of something less than a second it was discharging small projectiles which, traveling under their own continuously reduced power, were arching into the air to fall precisely 5 miles ahead and explode with the force of 8-inch shells such as we used in the First World War. Another gunner, 50 feet to the right, of him, waved a hand and called out something to him. Then, picking up his own tube and tripod, he gauged the distance between the trees ahead of him and the height of their lowest branches, and bending forward a bit, flexed his muscles and leaped lightly some 25 feet. Another leap took him another 20 feet or so, where he began to set up his piece. I ordered my observer then to switch to the barrage itself. He got a close focus on it, but this showed little except a continuous series of blinding flashes, which, from the viewplate, lit up the entire interior of the ship. An 800-foot focus proved better. I had thought that some of our French and American artillery of the 20th century had achieved the ultimate in mathematical precision of fire, but I had never seen anything to equal the accuracy of that line of terrific explosions as it moved steadily forward, mowing down trees as a scythe cuts grass, or used to 500 years ago, literally churning up the earth and the splintered, blasted remains of the forest giants to a depth of from 10 to 20 feet. By now, the two curtains of fire were nearing each other, lines of vibrant, shivering, continuous, brilliant destruction, inevitably squeezing the panic-stricken things between them. Even as I watched, a group of them who had been making a futile effort to get their three-rep ray machines into the air abandoned their efforts and rushed forth into the milling mob. I queried the control boss sharply on the futility of this attempt of theirs, and learned that the Hans, apparently in doubt as to what was going on, had continued to play safe and broken off their power broadcast after ordering all their own ships east of the Alleghenies to the ground for fear these ships they had traded to the Sinsings might be used against them. As I turned to my viewplate, which was still focused on the central section of the Sensing works, the confusion of the traders was entirely that of fear, for our barrage had not yet reached them.